In 1990, Nicaragua voted Daniel Ortega out of office. 3 presidents and 16 years later, the people voted for Ortega to come back. Sadly, his presidential resurrection owed to the misguided steps of his successors, and the Nicaraguan people were the ones left to suffer and pay the price. In the Nicaraguan elections of 1990, Violeta Chamorro was surprisingly elected ahead of Daniel Ortega. Chamorro represented the National Opposition Union, a coalition of parties set up to defeat the Sandinistas. Chamorro began her presidency by repealing many of the extremist policies put in place by the Sandinistas. Although her intentions meant well, Chamorro struggled with her goal for complete Nicaraguan reform due to the level of power held by both the Sandinistas and her National Opposition Union. Chamorro would stay on as Nicaragua's president until 1996. She was successful in bringing Nicaragua closer to democracy. Another key achievement of hers was disbanding any remnants of the Contras and also creating greater civilian control of the army. Chamorro's presidency would be remembered for the rise in homelessness and crime due to her austerity measures, as well as the political divide between herself and the Sandinistas. Elections were held again in 1996, and the significant thing about them was not who won, but who lost. It was Daniel Ortega and the Sandinistas. Yet again, they were jumped by a coalition party, this time being the Liberal Alliance, which was led by Arnaldo Alemán Lacayo. Like Chamorro, Alemán's presidency would do both good and bad things for Nicaragua. Unfortunately, he is remembered for the latter. Although Nicaragua's economy improved under Alemán's rule, he was constantly ridden by accusations of corruption. His presidency would end at the 2001 elections, and a year after that, Alemán was sentenced to 20 years house arrest for corruption charges. In the 2001 elections, Ortega and the Sandinistas lost out yet again. This time, Enrique Bolaños Gaya took power. He's remembered for making a deal which granted greater power to the Sandinistas. Later, Bolaños would leave his political party, which created a massive power struggle in Nicaragua between himself, his former party, and the Sandinistas. So, to recap, between 1990 and 2006, Nicaragua saw 3 different presidents defeat the Sandinistas and Daniel Ortega. And although none of the presidencies drove Nicaragua completely into the ground, Chamorro, Alemán and Bolaños are all remembered in some part for the mistakes they made. That explains why in 2006 the Sandinista candidate Daniel Ortega was elected back into power. Ortega was a different president to the one that served between 1985 and 1990. He was no longer an extremist or a Marxist. He actually agreed to uphold the new free market nature of Nicaragua, as well as creating better relations with the United States by entering into the Central American Dominican Republic Free Trade Agreement. Ortega's government focused its attention on improving the economics for the poor citizens of Nicaragua. He also aimed to make peace with Central American neighbours. In his first 3 years of power, Ortega was able to settle conflicts with Honduras and Costa Rica. The future finally looked brighter for Nicaragua. That was until the 2011 elections. Just before they occurred, the Nicaraguan Supreme Court overturned the ban on re-election, allowing Ortega to run for the presidency again. Ortega won re-election easily in 2011 and 2016, and he still rules the country to this day. However, he's increased his control of the National Assembly, and his ability to rule by decree has increased too, which has severely weakened the democratic state of Nicaragua. Since taking office in 2006, Ortega has exercised greater control of the police, courts, and military. Ortega is popular with the working class because many of his government's social policies have benefited them. The middle class, however, have grown disillusioned with his constant attempts to mold himself as a dictator. Today, Nicaragua is identified as the second poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. Most children don't complete more than 5 years of schooling. Nicaragua isn't a democratic state, it isn't a prosperous state, it's one that's suffering.